Commander Zethark had seen too many battles to count, but numbers comforted him. Numbers were clean, honest, and merciless. He watched them crawl across the bridge displays like cold constellations. 47 coalition ships, nearly 100. Enemy vessels 2 hours until encirclement, 50,000 colonists reduced to 10,000 hiding underground. His scales, faded to a stormy violet with age, caught the glow of status lights as the crew scrambled. He told himself to breathe. The enemy was the Skrull, biomechanical killers whose ships grew like tumors and healed like flesh, who had erased whole civilizations and remembered it as nothing more than a harvest. The Coalition, for all its proud doctrine and precise ethics, would break here. Unless the math changed, unless the rumor was true. The humans had come. They arrived as 12 small points burning out of slipspace, hardly worth a fleet commander's glance. Their hulls were plain, their technology primitive, their weapons kinetic throwbacks other species had abandoned when the galaxy discovered light and plasma. Stark's officers exchanged bleak looks. 12 against 100, bullets against beams, hope against history. It made no sense. Then a human captain appeared on the comm, a red-haired man with cool blue eyes and a hunter's smile. He asked for the tactical feed, scanned the impossible ratios, and did not frown. He simply asked Zethark to form a defensive. Wall, hold the enemy's focus, and on his signal, drop every shield in the coalition line for 3 seconds. 3 seconds sounded small, like saying, "Hold back the tide while I take a breath." It was madness. It was also the only path not already leading to a mass grave. Zethark gave the order. The Skrull pushed forward, a living tide gliding on vectors that smelled of slaughter. The Coalition locked into a bright wall of energy and fear. The 12 human ships did something that looked like panic, scattering into odd angles in 3 dimensions, easy targets at first glance. The countdown began, steady and awful. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Shields down. For a heartbeat, the Coalition felt naked, skinned, ready to be carved. Then the humans fired. Space did not flash with elegant beams. It howled. Railguns spat storms of tungsten and depleted metal. Missiles seeded with simple, vicious logic curled like hunting dogs. The void filled with a billion tiny choices, each projectile choosing a new angle, each warhead hunting a soft point, each rod shattering velocity into heat and rupture. Skrull shields, bred to blur energy and drink plasma, did nothing against solid, screaming matter. Ships that could stitch closed a cauterized wound could not stitch a hole where half a hull had been. Stark watched capital ships detonate in white blossoms of gas and gore. He watched the enemy try to peel away and slam straight into crossfires the humans had set like invisible fences. He watched minutes stretch into a legend. When his shields came back up at the 3-second mark, the Coalition had taken no hits. The Skrull had taken annihilation. The enemy broke. They tried to run. The humans did not let them. 12 small. Ships moved like a single thought, herding, cutting, blocking, turning flight paths into kill paths. It was not a battle, not anymore. It was a hunt, and the hunters were smiling the way professionals smile when their tools are sharp and the work is pure. In less than 5 minutes, the field went quiet. Stark did not cheer. The silence was too heavy for that. He breathed, slowly, while the human captain returned to the screen with calm eyes and a tired mouth and said the spacefight was done. But ground forces had already landed. If Sark agreed, they would fight together below. Sark agreed. He thanked the man. The man told him not to thank him yet. He had not seen humans fight on the ground. The drop pods roared through orange sky. On impact, the hatches blew outward, and the Marines surged into a world that smelled like hot metal and spilled blood. A young human named Danny Pierce felt his armor kick power into his legs and his rifle hum in his hands. The colony had been beautiful once, crystal towers that bent sunlight into rainbows. Now it was broken glass and shadows. The first scrawl. Warrior that charged him was 8 feet of blades and glistening chitin. Danny fired 3 times and watched armor-piercing rounds punch through the thing's chest, snapping its momentum like a rope. He did not celebrate. He pivoted, found the next target, and kept moving, because humans do not plant their feet and hope. They advance. Sergeant Katie Morgan's voice cut cleanly through panic. Overlapping fields of fire, circular defense, push forward by squads, keep the pressure, no gaps. The coalition soldiers near them, Veltarian scales and Curthian feathers, and Corvinite plates, shot carefully to conserve energy, aiming for perfect hits. The humans laid down ugly curtains of lead and tungsten, forcing the scrawl to slow, to hide, to lose the rhythm of their pack tactics. Aggressive defense, Danny called it, without looking from his sector. The alien beside him, a Valor warrior, snorted that it sounded like a contradiction. Danny grinned and asked why not both. Then a war beast, the size of a crawler bus, exploded from behind a broken tower, and the conversation ended. Coalition doctrine said, retreat and call for air support. Sergeant Morgan said, Jackson, railgun now. Private Jackson moved like he had been waiting for this exact moment his whole life. The portable cannon wound up with a thin metallic whine that bit teeth and bone, then cracked the air with a god's finger snap. The tungsten dart erased the war beast's head, clean as a magician's trick. The body thundered forward on momentum alone and fell, shuddering the street. For a second there was silence, the stunned quiet after a thunderclap. Then the Marines went back to work, and the coalition watched them with a complicated kind of awe, the kind that wonders, is this bravery or is this something colder that only looks like bravery from the outside? They fought for an hour that felt like a knife's edge. When it ended, the plaza was a graveyard. The human squad stood, sweating and swearing and checking ammo, alive in that messy, miraculous way veterans are alive. Coalition soldiers stepped. From cover with eyes that could not decide between respect and fear, Stark walked among them, careful not to step on the dead, and told Sergeant Morgan that her unit had held against odds that would have broken most lines, and they had done it while advancing. She shrugged that this was simply the job. He asked if they faced such monsters on Earth. She said no. The most dangerous thing on Earth was always other humans. Stark opened his mouth, then closed it. He understood more than he wanted to in that moment. In the medical bay 3 days later, a human named Nathan Cole sat up, pale but stubborn, arguing to return to duty. He had taken a blade through the belly. He should have died in minutes. He had not. Zethark watched a doctor pull up an internal display to explain. Medical nanites, billions of them, repairing tissue, suppressing infection, sealing vessels, knitting organs under guidance from a control mesh. Humans enhanced their soldiers, the doctor admitted, not to make monsters, but to survive monsters. Stronger bones, denser muscle, quicker nerves, all paired with machines small as dust that worked while the body slept. Civilians did not carry. These systems, he added, because Earth would not split itself into castes. Stark believed him, and still a chill walked his spine. He remembered 12 primitive ships turning a fleet into debris. He remembered a handheld railgun erasing a beast. The math had changed, yes. Perhaps the galaxy had changed with it. The council met under a ceiling of living crystal and old promises. Delegates raised concerns that sounded wise and afraid at once. Humans were effective, yes, but their methods were brutal. Their history was worse. They had fought wars that scarred continents, they had split atoms and used that split to burn cities. Could such a species be trusted inside the walls they had helped defend? The human ambassador did not smile. She spoke of proportional responses that look civilized and become slow, grinding slaughter. She spoke of ending wars quickly so fewer parents bury fewer children. The general spoke numbers. The captain spoke history with his jaw set, showing ruins and craters and graves the size of towns, reminding everyone that if humans were monsters, they were monsters who had learned that being monsters was a bad way to live. Then the ambassador offered something Zthark had never seen offered by a proud power, not freely. Total transparency. Observers in every unit. Shared doctrine. Open academies. Training seats for any species who wanted to learn their tactics. With ethics visible in the daylight, they were willing to endure. Trust, she said, is worth more than secret advantages. The vote passed, not without sharp words, but with a margin that said the coalition preferred hard allies to soft ideals that failed in fire. When it ended, Zthark found Captain Hayes in an observation gallery and admitted a private truth. He had once thought humans a threat to be contained. He still thought they were a threat, but only to those who would murder innocents. Hayes nodded. That was the line they chose to live by. Choice mattered. Zthark believed him, not because the words were pretty, but because the man had already shown how he fought and who he fought for. A year later, the test returned, as tests do, without warning and with cruelty. A research station at Helios 7 screamed into the void that it was dying. The enemy numbers were bad math again. More than 50 capital ships and a swarm of escorts. The Coalition Human Patrol could reach the system in 2 hours at maximum burn. Reinforcements were 6 hours away, maybe. The station would not live that long. Zthark did not hold a council. He plotted a line and pushed power to engines and felt in the nervous hush before battle a strange calm. They had learned to be a single fleet once. They could do it again. When they fell into Helios 7 space, the Skrull were already chewing at the moon's surface, cutting fire into laboratories and dreams. Zthark split the force with a plan that would have gotten him retired in another life. Coalition heavy cruisers took center and lit themselves up like bait, shields angled, batteries hot, broadcasting an irresistible target. Destroyers and frigates formed a screen to swat fangs. Human ships scattered to points an old doctrine would have called chaos, and a new doctrine recognized as a cage. Targeting algorithms shared and braided until human kinetics and coalition energy could arrive at the same heartbeat on different sides of the same hull. The enemy lunged at the center, because predators do not refuse meat. At the last moment, the coalition cruisers cut forward shields and dumped that power into engines and aft barriers, surging straight into the Skrull formation like men walking into the rain, not away from it. The Skrull blinked. In that blink, the humans fired. Rail rounds from odd angles, missiles from cold vectors, penetrators that chose bone over skin. The first volley tore gaps. Coalition beams, timed to the same breath, poured through the wounds like sunlight through broken glass. Ships tried to run. Lieutenant Commander Bennett's models had already drawn their escape routes. Waiting destroyers cut those alleys with bright knives. A Skrull capital ship, dying and angry, hurled itself at Zthark's flagship and hit like a mountain. The shields held, screaming. Another enemy spat bio-torpedoes that opened the human destroyer Eagle like a split knuckle. Smoke vented, crew died, and the comm carried a flat request for evacuation. The human commander on the net said no, not yet. Could they still fight? The answer came back steady. Yes. Then they would. They finished it in a last coordinated push that felt like standing in the middle of a cathedral as the organ shook the air. Not elegant, not cruel, simply complete. When the final enemy core flickered and went dark, the field was a thicket of drifting wreckage and cooling rage. The station reported survivors. The fleet reported damage across the board and no ships lost. Zthark let himself sit. He remembered a different man, a year earlier, who would have called this recklessness. He looked at his bridge now, a quiet braid of species, and called it trust. They took the evacuees aboard. They walked the wounded to bays where human medics and Corvinite surgeons worked side by side, swapping tools mid-procedure like musicians sharing a melody. In the hangar, Marines traded jokes with Valar sharpshooters, and Kurthian sappers argued gleefully about breaching charges with human engineers. Someone passed a cup of something sweet and too strong. No one asked which world it came from. For a while, the war thinned to the shape of story. The kind told in mess halls and long after midnight when the lights are low and the laughter cuts the edge off memory. Thark stood with haze above the slow ballet of repair crews and tractor beams. He said the thing out loud so it would stop echoing in his skull. A year ago, he had feared the humans would burn the coalition down by accident or by hubris or by hunger for a fight. Now he feared something else, quieter, heavier, better. He feared that without them, entire edges of the map would go dark. Hayes did not preen. He said humans had learned strategy from species who had kept peace for 1,000 years, and the coalition had learned tactics from a species that had learned, too late and at great cost, how to end a fight before it ate a generation. Together they were less wrong than either alone. Sark laughed, surprised by the sound. Less wrong was, in war, sometimes the highest compliment truth deserved. News of Helios 7 bent the council again, but not into suspicion. Into work, training slots filled. Cross-posted officers carried doctrine like seeds. Some worlds still whispered that humans were too dark, too fast, too willing to turn war into math. Other worlds whispered back that math is what keeps children breathing. In barracks and bays across the coalition, Marines of every shape argued and learned and lifted and ran until the rhythms matched. You could walk a corridor on any fleet and hear a dozen languages cursing cheerfully at the same drill. The Skrull did not stop being monsters. The galaxy did not stop being sharp. But legends do not ask permission to be born. They happen when an old commander watches 12 primitive ships redraw the rules. When a young Marine asks an alien to trust him and then earns that trust. When a council that prefers gentle words votes for hard truth. Legends happen in 3 seconds of naked courage, and in 1 hour of muddy, breathless survival, and in a year of stubborn, unglamorous study. Legends happen when fear learns the shape of its opposite and decides to stand anyway. On the day the fleet turned for home, Thark walked the length of his ship. He paused where a Valar taught a human to sight along a plasma rifle, and where a human taught a Corvinite to break a grapple with an elbow, a twist, and a step. He paused at a viewport where the damaged eagle, patched and proud, held station with lights steady again. He paused at a memorial wall where someone had written in careful letters the names of those who had not made it out of Helios 7. He touched the crystal with the back of a hand and murmured a promise he did not realize he had been composing for a year. "We will fight faster to make fewer names." When he reached the bridge, the stars were straight ahead, and the crew looked older in the way that skill makes you older. He took his chair. He thought of the first time he had dropped shields on a stranger's count. He thought of the first time he had called a human captain by his name with respect and without fear. He thought of legends, and how they are less about heroes and more about the moment when many hands do something hard together and do not fail. The war, where humans became legends, did not begin with a victory, though it looked like one. It began with the decision to trust the wrong weapons at the right time, the young soldiers in old armor, the allies who broke rules and kept faith. It continued in quiet halls and loud bays, where methods became muscle memory. It carried through council votes and shared grief and braided doctrine. It ended nowhere because wars end and legends do not. They settle into the way people talk about danger and duty. They change the math by changing what commanders believe is possible when the count looks bad. Thark looked at the scatter of cold suns and said, almost to himself, that perhaps this is what civilization means in a sharp universe. Not softness, not ceremony. The choice to stand with those who make you braver, even when they make you nervous. He told the helm to take them home. The ship turned, and the fleet turned with it, and for a long glide the stars seemed to hold them up. Somewhere far behind, broken Skrull hulls drifted like defeated ghosts. Somewhere far ahead, a council waited with questions and budgets and the hard work of peace. Somewhere in the middle, in the quiet of his chest, an old commander who worshipped numbers admitted one last conversion. The math had learned a new term. It was called humanity, and with it the sum came out different.